Hi everyone, it's Rob Nassif here, owner of the Hen House Rehearsal Studios and manager of the Fame and Red Hook. Thanks for joining us. We have a great discussion with Ian Kenny, frontman of Carnival and Birds of Tokyo, a great friend, and it's a real honor to chat with you today, Kenny. So let's get into it. Mate, long-term memory and being a musician, two things that typically don't go hand in hand, but can you cast your mind back and remember what you were doing on the 19th of July, 1998?
Wow, that was some time ago. That would have been in the infancy of Carnival when we were trying to figure out what the hell a band, what it meant to be a band or how to start a band. So I was listening to a whole bunch of alt metal, a whole bunch of stoner rock, late grunge rock.
Yep.
Probably smoking things I shouldn't smoke and just trying to work it out, you know, just beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were just beginning because on that day, 19th of July, 1998, what you were doing is you were loading into the Swanbourne Hotel to play a show for the opening heat of the National Campus Band Competition. And the only reason I know that isn't because I'm an epic stalker or anything like that. It's because Gyroscope played that same show that same day. And I think I've got a list of our first 100 shows, and it was the 22nd ever Gyroscope show. And it would have been, I don't know, pretty early in the Carnival sphere. But I remember that show. I remember seeing you guys, and I can't really remember what you sounded like. I can't remember the show, but what I do remember was meeting you and also meeting Drew and thinking, hey, firstly, you guys were our age. I think I was 17. You would have been 16 at the time. And I remember thinking, hey, these are a young bunch of guys giving it a go. And so I think for me, it's so nice 21 years later to be chatting with you via Zoom and talking about your career, looking back retrospectively, because I have followed along as a fan and as a friend. And it's been so cool to see everything you've achieved with Carnival and then Birds of Tokyo. So happy 21st anniversary of our friendship and that first gig, Kenny.
Absolutely. Oh, wow, what a way to kick this off. Oh man, thank you. 100% back at you. I do remember that. And same thing, meeting you for the first time and just being such a genuine dude that you still are, lovely, good-natured man, and it's a massive part of your reputation everywhere you go. So yeah, back at you, buddy.
No, thanks, mate. So Kenny, let's go back to that period of time, 1998. Talk to me about what your sort of dreams and aspirations as a musician were when you were first starting out.
Oh God, it was so early on in the piece. I don't think I really knew what I was doing so much, nor did the band as such at that point. I mean, we put out our first EP around that point, and that was sort of Carnival version 1 point something. You know, we had a different drummer and a different guitarist. I believe Drew was playing bass at the time, and I was sort of fronting the band. And then fast forward to putting out, you know, the next EP, we kind of had a better lineup. But in the very beginning, we were just winging it, man. To be honest, we were very dedicated to the idea of trying to figure out how to write songs. The songs came first. That we did put forward. Outside that, I didn't know too much else about songwriting apart from that. You know, everything has to sort of start and lead back to the song and try and write the best piece of music you can. I haven't listened to that stuff in a very long time. That's probably not a good example of good songwriting, but hey, it got better. We got better.
You certainly did get better. And the good news is I hadn't listened to that EP for a very long time. And I think most of the people here wouldn't have listened to that EP for a very long time or potentially ever. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have a quick listen to it. We're going to go back to Carnival 1.0. Yeah. We're going to listen to the very first song on that first EP. I'm going to do a little screen share and an audio share. God knows if this is going to work, but I have tested it and it did work. So let's have a quick listen now, everyone. We'll just let this roll for about 50 seconds or so we can get a feel about, you know, version 1.0. All right, let's have a listen.
song? God, I've forgotten.
So I'll go back to the, there we go. So that's Carnival 1.0, Kenny. So I mean, at that point in time, can you remember how often, you know, you were rehearsing? And I share that not to embarrass you. I share it because it's a great reminder to everyone that's tuned in here, most of us musicians, of where bands typically start and if they keep going, where they can end up. So that period of time for you, what did that look like, as far as, you know, I guess you're still in high school. Were you rehearsing a lot? Were you writing a lot?
We were trying to write as much as we could because we kind of knew that there was something about the band or something about the way we tried to write music. There was something to it. We just knew we hadn't figured out, you know, how to do it. We just knew there was something in the writing. And, you know, we kind of wanted to push that as far as we could. So we rehearsed, you know, a few times a week. I think the first place we ever rehearsed would have been at Soundworks, Osborne Park.
Yep.
You know, we're all kind of working shitty jobs and then trying to do music on the side. So yeah, it was a combination of that, rehearsing in the evenings, shitty jobs, and then just trying to figure out how to write songs without knowing how to do it yet, you know?
Yeah. Well, it certainly worked, because I think what's interesting is if I listen to that first EP, and I had to listen to the whole thing yesterday, and it's like super raw, but you can see the sprinklings of something cool going on there, and it was sort of definitely out of step for the rest of Perth music at that period of time, which was really dominated by like pop and indie pop bands. What's more impressive to me is what you guys really did next, which was the Persona EP. And I think that what's really amazing to me is the progression, that in the space of 2 years, so you released the first EP in 99, you released your second EP, Persona, in 2001, so 2 years later. And I'll just play the opening track of that, just so everyone gets a feel for the progression in the space of 2 years. Check it out.
You said just show me what you wanna be, I'll never stand in your way. Take it back and then you say again, tell me what you wanna be, I'll never stand in your way.
Yeah, what a tune. I mean, this is that. Whoa, it's back. This is a huge progression, Kenny. So in the space of 2 years, you've gone from that first EP to this second EP. How often would you guys have been gigging during this period of time?
It would have been pretty much every weekend, if not every second weekend. So because of that, we were sort of starting to form, you know, a bit of a solid playing background for the band. With that first EP, we recorded that all in a day, not knowing how to record, just sort of figuring it out at some studio that doesn't exist anymore, but it was in Subiaco. And then with Persona, we got into Loop Studio, I believe, and spent, maybe it was 3 days, maybe it was 4 days, I don't know, maybe a week, I don't know, and had a bit more time and sort of, by that point, 2 years on, the band had been playing enough. And I think at that point too, the writing for Persona, I think Drew, he started to form some pretty solid ideas, and these would have been the sort of base ideas for what Carnival was going to be. That was a sort of blueprint, I think. And once he sort of had the guitar ideas and started sort of really sinking into some good riffs and whatnot, that opened the door for me as a songwriter and as a vocalist. So I think between the two of us there, when that sort of thing started to show itself, it kind of kicked open the door for the potential, you know, in what we could do.
Yeah, this certainly felt like a real moment for me. I mean, at that point in time, I was deeply entrenched with the local music scene. Gyros were same with you, playing every week, really, sometimes twice a week. And we would come and hang out and see you guys play. And like I say, I'd always been following the band's progression. And it was probably about 6 months after this EP was released. And I saw you guys play a show. might have been at the Rosemount, might have been Grosvenor Back Room, somewhere like that. And you played Fade, and the crowd was singing along, and they were into it. It's obviously the start of Fade is so awesome with just your vocal there. The crowd was singing along, and I thought, this is crazy. This is like a local Perth band that weren't getting any Triple J play, but people were singing along to it. And it certainly felt like this was the moment that people within the West Australian music scene certainly took notice. Do you think Fade was that first song that really connected with people?
I think it was, and only because it kind of still is. Like, even when we do shows, you know, at this point, people still call out for that. So there is a bit of it left a mark on some people, and it's sort of, that song has traveled with us through our records and through our career. So it was definitely one, you know, probably the I guess the poster boy song for that EP. Yeah, definitely. It's quite an important song, actually.
Yeah, and then I guess as we move forward, so you've released that EP 2001. Themata only comes out in 2005, so there's a 4-year gap, which with Carnival we're totally used to. 4 years would be okay with these days; that would be fine. But back then, 4 years between releases was unheard of. During this period of time, I mean, obviously you're coming off the bounce that you get with Persona EP and the popularity, but it's been 4 years before you release the album. Was there ever a moment in that period of time where, you know, the dreams or the aspirations were starting to fade, or was it still very much focused on, you know, writing better songs, and you were still very much on the rise?
It was very much focused on the music. Yeah, we didn't really have an agenda. We didn't really have a timeline. There was no real, you know, establishment yet at all. There was no label involved at that point. It was very much a DIY endeavor at that point. So there was no pressure. So we were just chasing it, and we chased it like you wouldn't believe to get Themata to that point. Still not really knowing what we were doing. We were just chasing pure emotional output, pure melodic output and influences, and just trying to stream it all and put it together. And we were writing it ourselves. We were recording it ourselves in demos, in pieces for months, yeah. You know, and eventually it took 4 years to get together, which began the bittersweet curse of Carnival. 4 years between every record. I don't know why that is, but it's still that way. But you know, so yeah, we were very much all about the music, but just fairly free form, man, until we actually had something tangible. We actually had enough tracks that gave us the vision. This is going to be the first record for Carnival. This is what it's going to look like. Yeah,
and you make a good point there. You were unsigned. It was very much DIY. You guys released that album off your own back. How, from a financial perspective, it's something we all balance as musicians. How did you manage your finances? For instance, how did you pay for Themata as well as balance work and writing and recording?
For Themata, I believe at that point we would have had, you know, enough, let's say, cash in the kitty from the shows we had played leading up to that and while we were making the record. Plus, we were all working, doing different jobs. You know, it was still working during the day, playing music at night, rehearse at night, sort of thing. So I can't remember if we contributed that way or not, but somehow we got enough, you know, cash together to make the record. And then I believe we put it out through MGM, so they distribute the record. And then after that, after putting out Themata, things kind of changed after that for us. That was a bit of a sort of pivotal point.
Yeah, it certainly was. I remember you guys launched Themata at the Lookout sometime at the start of 2005. I think he even sold it out. I think it was a massive show. I remember bumping into Drew around the Flying Scotsman, putting up posters for the album launch. And I remember saying to him, "Oh, wow, man, congrats. The only band that's taken longer to release their first album than Gyroscope is Carnival." So you had sort of like hit that, you'd hit that hurdle. You know, we both our bands started in 97. We put our first album out 2004. you put yours out 2005. And I remember just chatting with him and just saying, hey, this is awesome. You guys have got your record out. And certainly that was a pivotal moment for Carnival because, you know, I think that's where we first saw Triple J get on board. I think you guys did your first national tour supporting Cog. It must have been an exciting time in the band to get it out. Take us back to that moment, where your first sort of national tours. How was it all?
So that was sort of one of those beautiful dream moments for any young artist or young band coming up doing something, you know, that they're passionate about, that they love. I remember hearing Shutter Speed on the radio for the first time I'd ever heard anything I'd been involved in on the radio, and that was one of those moments where it just sort of changes your world. It really does. It tilted my world off its axis for a brief point there, and then, you know, we started playing shows in around Perth, sort of showcasing and playing Themata, which had such a great reaction to our fans there. And then, like you just said, we got on our first sort of national tour with Cog on Themata, and it got us access to the rest of the country because we knew we had fans out there, just hadn't seen them or met them yet. And once that happened, we sort of had seen the rest of the country. We had seen the reaction there, and it was just like Perth, nothing but a lot of love for what we were trying to do. And we came back to Perth, and it was all just a bit like, whoosh, like, fuck, this is a thing now. Like, what do we do with this? And this is big. It felt bigger than us, and it was a wonderful thing, but kind of shit scary at the same time, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that it's at this point, and feel free to correct me, you know, if I'm wrong, would you say that at this point you had felt like you were sort of making it as a musician, or did that come later?
Yeah, shortly after that came, once we sort of figured out that we could tour the country, we started making a different sort of income there, which wasn't a hell of a lot, to be honest. But what it did was allow us to be a bit more free time, full-time musicians. So there was a trade-off. So we could go out, access touring a lot more, you know, and once you kind of get to tour like that and you get to sort of do it the way you want to do it, however that is, like, and for us it was touring and going and playing, you feel like, shit, man, I'm doing this. Like, this is for real. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing, mate. Yeah, it certainly was an exciting time. I remember hearing Rockefort with the Cat Empire horn section on there, and just being blown away by the whole entire thing. It was incredible, and it was exciting. It was really exciting to see after the years of graft you had put in, that it was starting to pay off. I think for a lot of bands, the thought, you know, let's look at the Carnival example. You know, what you're talking about and that sort of success and that feeling that was coming through for you, let's call it 2005, 2006. That's 8/9 years after you started. How do you reconcile with that? I mean, if it hadn't happened after 8 or 9 years, would it have been a waste of time? Or how do you reconcile the amount of effort that you have to put in where you don't always know if you're going to get that payoff and that reward?
Well, I guess you don't know until it happens. If you're lucky enough and you're up for it, you're built for it, part of the journey is what draws you in, and trying to become the songwriter you want to be or become the band you want to be. That is forever in the working and in the making. So it's a constant, you know, work in progress. But if you're in love with it and it's something that you truly want to do, I don't think it ever felt like it labored. You know, it's been tough. It's been hard at times, but it's been equally as rewarding and good for the heart, mind and soul and whatnot. But never felt like it labored. Still kind of doesn't, even this far on. Yeah, but yeah, you know.
That's great. Yeah, I can relate to that, mate. You know, there were certainly times in the early Jari days where, you know, especially when we got to that, like, sort of 5, 6, 7 years in and still hadn't released an album and had, you know, not really toured, where I was starting to wonder, like, gosh, is it ever going to happen? But I'd always come back to the fact that I just loved making music with the guys in the room, and that just creating that song, listening back to it and then playing it live, even if it was just in Perth, was really enough fuel of enjoyment to keep on chasing down that bigger dream and that bigger picture of sort of becoming a national musician and then hopefully seeing the world through the music. So I can totally relate to what you're saying. Another thing I wanted to touch on was sort of, if we look at that period of when Carnival started through to 2004. 2004 is around the time you solidified the lineup of Carnival, with Drew obviously was already there, but Hoss, Juddy, Jono, the classic Carnival lineup as we see it now. But, you know, over that sort of 7-year period, the one constant has been Drew Goddard. He's been by your side the whole entire way. Talk to me about your relationship with Drew and your sort of bandmate in Carnival.
Absolutely. He is all of the above, and then, you know, so much more than that. I've known Drew longer than half the time I've been alive. I think we met in school, so we were sort of buddies before we even really truly thought about music. I'm really good friends with his older brother, who's also a very talented, creative dude as well. So, you know, that's how we all met. Drew picked up the guitar when he was in high school, and I don't know, as soon as he sort of started truly finding his place with his instrument, and, you know, he just became this absolute beast of a player. And once you sort of sit and get involved with musicians like this, you're drawn to them because usually you feel like they're better than you at what they're doing. So that always motivates me to sort of pick up my game, which I would advise anybody who wants to start a band. You know, always look for people who you think might be just a little bit better than you, because ultimately, if you play together long enough, they'll make you a better musician, and you'll learn more from each other. But yeah, he's just awesome. He's just such a down to earth cat. Like, so that's been hugely important, and had a great effect on the whole band, just getting us through the good times and the shit as well. Just comes down to being solid people, trying to be solid people and be the best you can. So yeah.
That's awesome. And did the various lineup changes you went through over that period of time, did it slow the process, or was it just what had to happen in order to get where you are today?
It may have at times. Yeah, I think when we had Ray Hawking playing drums right up until Persona, and then just after. But as we were approaching, you know, sort of getting real with Themata, we asked Steve. He was playing in a couple of bands like Beside the Point and something else. I can't remember, some other things. But yeah, we sort of lost our drummer there for a while. So there's a bit of a slow up there before we had Judd. But, you know, it was super obvious once we got Steve involved, and Jono was already sort of our bass player. The parts Drew had written, guitar parts for Themata, he had realised quite quickly that, hey, this record is going to be heavily dependent on two guitars. Like, it's just not going to work without it. So we met Hoss when we were doing shows with a band called Super Heist, and he was the tour manager of that band. And we just sort of clicked with him. I think he was a fan of what we were trying to do. And, you know, we actually invited him over for some long sort of form rehearsals, which went well. And then we went out and did a bunch of shows. He was living in Melbourne at the time. He had his whole sort of setup over there. And then I think when things got even further and deeper, sort of post Themata and leading up to Sound Awake and maybe what that was going to be, he came over to Perth and started living the full WA life.
Yeah, and has never looked back. No, it's great.
And never looked back. You're full.
Yeah.
You're full.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think it's around that time I really got to know Hoss and the rest of the gang. We it was cool. In about 2006, Gyro moved into what is the Hen House Studio 1 now to start writing our third album, Breed Obsession. At that point in time, you guys had the upstairs small room and had started work on what would become Sound Awake. And I was trying to think of the dates. It's about October 2006, both bands moved into the studio. By, I think it was, I don't know, like May 2007, we had moved out and we had gone to record the album in Liverpool and London, and we recorded Breed Obsession. We released the first single, Snakeskin. That came out, it did well. We ended up releasing Breed Obsession, did really well. We toured the country. The whole process went for about 18 months, and it was a real peak in the world of Gyroscope. Ended up playing our biggest shows. And I bring all this up not to gloat or do anything like that, but it's to bring up the point that we wrote, we recorded, and we toured an entire album cycle. We then moved back into the Hen House towards the end of 2008, so sort of 2 years later, and you guys were still in the upstairs room and you were still writing Sound Awake.
Yeah. And actually, in fact, it probably could have gone the way that you guys would have done all of that lesson, been away for so long, and we would have come down for a break. You would have just got back and we'd be like, hey, what's been going on, fellas? What have you been doing?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I walked back in there 2 years later, popped up to the room, knocked on the door. You were in there, Drew were in there, and you're like, yeah, we finished that verse we were working on 2 years ago. It's coming along.
Oh, man. That is the true nature of Carnival. Yeah, we honestly lived in that upstairs room, and it was a tiny room, man. Like,
yeah.
But you know, it was the same thing again, like what we had kind of figured out about Themata. I don't think we felt any pressure to deliver it again on Sound Awake, only because Sound Awake was becoming something else. But we just did the same thing. We dove in to the finite details, trying to tweak every part we came up with, and we second guessed ourselves a lot, to be honest. Like sometimes we're like, man, is this good enough or is it not? And we'll go round and round about on parts until we get it right or it feels right. So we did the same thing. We took a lot of time getting that record to what it needed to be, at great cost to our mental health and a whole bunch of stuff. But it really paid off, not in any sort of larger sense, but for the fact that we actually made the music and we made the record that we wanted to. And it, yeah, again, for any Carnival fans, I think that's probably the go-to record. And I'm just glad. I'm glad it's out there. I'm glad people have it. And that's kind of all you really want, you know?
Yeah. So like, I'm just kind of thinking, I mean, I'm putting myself in your shoes here. You know, when the boys finish off a song, let's say it's Goliath or whatnot from that record, and you've got a 9-minute song to now sing on, create lyrics, melodies. I mean, it seems incredibly daunting. What's the approach to, where's the step off point to creating the melodies and lyrics for a Carnival song?
So I guess I've always looked at my role to use melody and to use it like a kind of glue, to try and glue these parts and transitions together, because I don't always, odd time's not really my favored place. So sometimes I hear a lot of odd time and I kind of have to guess my way around it until I can sort of glue and stick things together. As long as I feel the melody's strong enough, that's kind of how I go about it. So, you know, odd time's cool, but it's just got a groove. It's got to hold a real feel. Odd time is all good, but it's got to have feel. And thankfully, the writing in Carnival delivers that in most parts. So that's how I feel my job. I go try and melodically glue things together. But it can be daunting when someone drops a 12-minute piece at your feet and goes, hey, sing on this. You're like, wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
I can only imagine, man. It feels daunting when I think about it. Are there routines? Are there approaches you take to getting yourself in the headspace to be creative and to get your best work?
There are. I think for me, it comes down to repetition. When I'm listening to parts, I just have to drill them in. Space-wise, I don't know, man. I try. It's always good to have your own studio, have your own space, and something that feels creatively right with the guys that you're sharing the space with, whether that be a rehearsal studio, your own live room, whatever you want to do there, or your space at home. I try not to get too comfortable with that because you don't always have access to it. So for years and years, I've tried to practice just getting up in the morning and with it, whatever I have in front of me on my computer, if it's just a part or it's a whole song, I'll get up and try and just work on that, just to hammer in a practice day by day, even though I know that's not the most inspiring way to work. And I know inspiration is super important and we should always try and find that. But I just get up every day and just try and bam, hammer out something. I know it might be shit. I know it might lead to nothing, but it's just the practice of exercising that muscle and fine tuning it as best I can. So yeah, two parts. I think you should work at it as much as you can, but if you, and then try and design that space that works for you.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Kenny. I think that's an important point. I mean, I think I think there's a romantic notion around being creative and being a musician, that you wait for the inspiration to hit and you can't force the inspiration. That's a narrative that we hear a lot of. But certainly from my perspective, and what I just saw in Gyra with my bandmates, is I think what was more important is exactly what you explained there. It's that process of chipping away at it daily. It doesn't have to be great every day. It can be absolute crap, but getting into that headspace and the routine of work is just so important in eventually climbing the mountain.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
it is a mountain. You're right.
Yeah, it is. So just an observation here, Kenny, like as I was listening to the Birds of Tokyo records and I was listening to the Carnival records, is there's been especially with Good Lord and even two of us, your lyrics have always been great, but there's a vulnerability and a fragility to your lyrics, especially in the latest Birds of Tokyo stuff, that in many ways, I mean, when I first heard Good Lord, I thought, God, this is just so personal. And I thought, gosh, it felt brave. I was like, this is brave that you would be willing to share something so personal. My question is more around, there'll be a whole bunch of vocalists and listening to this as songwriters. What advice could you give a vocalist in allowing themselves to get to that place of vulnerability where they're willing to share such personal insights into themselves?
Well, over the years as a lyric writer, I never really thought I was the best lyric writer. In the early days, it was just so much free form sort of stuff. But I was a very different writer back then. I was such a younger sort of dude, purely driven by, like I was saying before, that sort of unfiltered emotion. I mean, lyrics don't always have to make sense. And back then, I just don't know how much I really cared about it. It was just more about the song and melody and just creating these worlds and these spaces and these, these things. But these days, though, I kind of take it, I feel much differently about lyrics. I've kind of learned the power in language and where it can go and what people can do with it once you sort of put it out into the world and how it can change things. I'm just fascinated by that side of things. But to answer your question, I think the only way really I know how to do it and do it well is just to be honest and to be real about it. And that's not always easy, but it will come through. It'll come through in the song, and people will feel that message. They'll read it and read it well. So yeah, it's just honesty, man. Just tell it like it is. Of course, you've got to wrap it up in the song. It's kind of got to have its hooks and its its frills and stuff. But if you tell it like it is, you've got nowhere to hide, and people will see it for what it is.
And people relate to it. Yeah, I think it's so powerful. And Good Lord is arguably your most successful single to date, and will end up being your most successful from a streaming perspective. And it's a song that's touched a lot of people. And I think, just as a fan of your band, thank you for being so open and honest. I think it's amazing. And I think we can all take, I think everyone listening in on this, tapping into that emotion and allowing yourself to share that vulnerable side is really powerful in music, because it's the emotion we typically love in most of our acts and bands. So it's a big takeaway I hope everyone can get. So thanks for sharing that, Kenny. That's awesome. Just, even Two of Us, I think, is just such an awesome song. Like, congrats on that. You've sort of, all the songs you've released off the upcoming Birds record are human design I think. Yeah, Human
Yeah,
Design, April. It's coming out April 24th. So tell us about that process for writing that record, because the songs we've heard of Human Design are very different to what came before it with Brace. So tell us about Human Design and that whole process, bringing us into the modern day of how you work and your creativity in the Birds of Tokyo camp.
sure. So Human Design, that the writing for that record and the process leading up, from the sort of first song to the record coming out in a couple of weeks, that's about 2.5 years worth of work. Now that wasn't planned. It's just how it rolled out, because we never started off writing a record. It just came song by song by song, just kind of these pieces of music coming together through, it was a bit of a reaction to a bunch of shit that I was dealing with, and thankfully, and I'm grateful that I have a band around like that to sort of exercise these things through. So it just came song after song. We didn't really have a plan to write a record. We didn't know where it was going as such, but once we figured out we kind of had at least 4 or 5 decent songs, at that point we actually figured out, hey man, there's a bit of an overarching story to this.
Yep.
I don't know how much of it I was comfortable to let out of the bag. Maybe I guess enough to make a record. So yeah, once we figured we had enough and the story was there and we figured out a way to deliver it properly, it was like, hey, we've got a bunch of other songs here. We just need to finish them off and let's make this thing a record.
It's fantastic, mate. And I guess, keep bringing it back to COVID-19 related, was there any thought about pushing the album back, but you guys have sort of held firm with the April 24 release?
Not so much. It came up, but it was quite a brief discussion. I mean, putting out a record at the moment, I mean, it's all going to hit online pretty quick anyway. I mean, people are sitting at home with nothing to do really, so there's going to be a lot of people that can access the new record and will have time to listen to it, and it's really not going to change too much. The only kind of pisser is we can't go out and play the thing until things change. But hey, man, we'll do it. We'll do what we can.
Totally. No, absolutely, mate. I'm going to wrap up my portion of this because I could talk to you for days, but I want to throw it open to a few questions. But I don't know, as you reflect on the past 22 years as a musician, were there any key breaks or moments of luck that helped you on this journey for either band?
I don't know about luck, but there were a few things. Like I said, getting the right supports. I mean, it was funny. Like I think I've said before, that COG thing, only because it just got us access to the rest of the country, which allowed people to get their hands on Themata. And then we had some really good supports, like with Sepultura, Devin Townsend, and a whole bunch of other acts like that. Which sort of just, the more bands we played with like that, or the more sort of good supports we got, it was just all word of mouth back then, man. People just started talking about the band, and it kind of blew up from that point. So, they definitely help. I think also too, to be honest, like once we got to that point, just after Themata walking into Sound of the Wake, we got our hands on some really good management, good booking agent, started to take things quite seriously, presenting the band as an actual touring sort of band. And then from Australia, we were able to hit North America, into Europe and beyond and whatnot. So, and we just toured that for years. And then, once you sort of have all those sort of key things in place and your band is sort of operating as a, sort of a touring band, you take it a little, your lifestyle changes, your whole life changes actually at that point. It gets pretty weird and wonderful, but you know what I'm talking about.
No, it's wonderful. I mean, that's why I encourage people to chase the dream, because I think chasing the dream of becoming a musician, and a full-time musician at that, is a dream worth chasing. It's a lot of fun. I certainly have had a very enriched life because of my experiences in Gyroscope. I've got to meet incredible people along the way. You're one of them, which is lovely. So Kenny, look, I could keep going here, but what I'd like to do now is Tom. If you can unmute yourself, Tom Wilson, and let's just take a few questions from people. Who would you like to throw it open to?
Just before I get stuck in, I just want to mention a little. I don't think I've ever mentioned this to you, Kenny, before. But when I was like, I would have been like 20 or something, I met Drew when I was mixing drums for a Steve Judd who's doing a drum playthrough in the car park of Cosmic. And I met Drew, and then I gave him a paper to roll a cigarette. And so he gave me 2 door spots to the Carnival and Dead Letter Circus show. I think it was at Red Hill Auditorium. Anyway, so me and my friend went there, and we found out that we had backstage passes that we weren't prepared for. And we walked back after the show, and we were the only 2 guys there that weren't in the band. We looked like a couple of stunned mullets, and you were the only guy that came up with 2 beers in your hand, gave one to both of us, and said, "How you going?" And I always remember that.
Kenny for president.
Yeah, no, it was great. I always heard the stories. You were the nicest guy in rock and roll, but it's true.
Well, thank you very much, man. That must have been one hell of a cigarette that Drew rolled. I mean, that went the distance. Yeah.
And that goes the distance. Yeah. I'm not encouraging people to take up smoking, but I'm just saying.
Good on you, Tom. Thanks, dude.
Yeah, but look, there's heaps of questions that have come through, and I'm just taking a few snaps on my phone as well. But I want to throw the first one out to Tori.
I'll go until you get it.
Pause it first.
I can't. It's live. He's talking.
So if Tori, you had a question about Kenny and what he's up to isolation at the moment.
Yeah,
He did something hilarious on there.
So if you want to unmute and have a chat, go for it.
Great. Yeah. So I'm just wondering how you pass the time in self-isolation, because I'm an extrovert, and I gone from a routine to absolutely nothing. So just wondering how you cope. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's a weird time. To be honest, I'm spending a lot of time listening to, and I'm enjoying having the time to listen to a bunch of music. Funny enough, I don't always get the time to actively chase down music. So it's cool spending a lot of time at home, spending some time with music. I've taken up trying to grow indoor plants. It's sort of going okay. It's not really going that well. Man, I think I'm doing what everyone else is doing. I'm watching too much TV, listening to music. I'm just doing some cooking. Cooking's a good one. Trying to cook a bunch. I've got a setup at home. I'm writing every day. Like I said, I keep doing that thing. I just get up and keep writing lyrics. Both Carnival and Birds have songs in the wings. Both bands usually do, depending on what part of cycles we're at. There's always songs there that are waiting for parts to become something. So I keep writing every day. At the moment, Birds are kind of in pretty full-on promo mode, although at the moment we're trying to find innovative ways to do it all online. Like normally I'd be in Sydney right now, whatever, doing a bunch of stuff with the band together, but it's just not possible. So got a bunch of online interviews. I've actually got a photo shoot happening over Skype in the next couple of days. I've never done that before, but I don't know how that works. I've got to figure that out. But
that'll be interesting.
Like that. Yeah, it should be cool.
Nice.
Awesome.
That's what I've been doing.
Thanks, Tori. And I want to flick it over now to Ben. Ben had a great one as well with regards to time signatures and how you're handling them through the Carnival tunes. Ben, jump in.
I had 2 questions. I'm glad you mentioned which one, because I forgot. So you mentioned finding odd times difficult to work with when you're writing new material. When it gets to the point when you're playing them on stage and you perform a song like Carnival's AM War, are you counting the song in your head, or are you able to just feel it in its entirety and just go with the flow?
Yeah, so that's the thing. It should get it to a point where it's just feel like, so you just know the music, and plus if you start counting things in your head like bars or whatever, I reckon it could come undone, and I think it would affect the performance too. So Yeah, man, I don't really do that. I just sort of get familiar with the song, kind of know my part in it, and go on feel. That's how I feel it should be done. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Is there a one question limit?
No, go for it, man.
Go for it, bro.
So I wrote this one on Facebook. I think a lot of us will agree the cover from Carnival for London Grammar's Hey Now was pretty fantastic. How do you and the guys approach doing a cover of an existing song like this, especially a popular one? And how much time in that case did you have to put the song together?
I think we've only done, 3 covers in our whole career, so we don't do them that often. I think overall we do enjoy doing them, but to be honest, we spend so much time trying to figure out our own music. They don't always make it in on the pile, you know. But with Hey Now, we had a rehearsal room in Perth. We figured out the basic frame for it. I think Steve just had kick, hat and snare, John on his bass, and then the 2 lads, maybe it was one on acoustic, I can't remember what Drew was playing. But anyway, we figured out the framework for it, rehearsed it a few times, and I can't even remember what key we put the song in, but I remember listening to Hannah, the singer from Hey Now, and I sort of just listened to her. I hadn't sung it yet. I was like, I'm pretty sure I could sing that. Like, she doesn't sound too high. But man, once you actually go to sing it with a male voice, I was like, oh shit, it's really high. But it was all good. We sort of made it ours and made it work. And like, actually, to be honest, man, that's probably the favorite cover I think we've done. I really enjoyed that.
That's great. Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure, bro.
Awesome. And Rom's also had a question regarding whether you do a covers album, but I feel like that kind of answers that question. If you've only done 3 so far, and albums maybe another.
Probably not.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Michelle had a really, really awesome question with regards to management decisions. Michelle, if you want to jump in and have a chat.
Hello.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi, I had a question about, I know you mentioned management earlier. I wanted to know how you made the decision on your manager and what factors you sort of pulled into your decision making.
So at the time, with Themata, we had a manager, a local, and it was more like a friend-based thing at the time. And Themata was sort of still getting it together, like on that front, like getting management and a booking agent. It was all sort of very local sort of stuff, which sort of worked, you know, with that. But once sort of Themata became, you know, it felt like it was getting bigger than us, and we were writing towards Sound Awake, you know, the whole landscape of the band was shifting and changing, and it was becoming way more full-time. It was demanding more of us and vice versa and whatnot. So it just became time to sort of, you'll feel it. Anybody who gets to this point in your career, when you have a set of management, either management will get you to one point, or the band will outgrow that. It just happens. It happens all the time. It's a total natural thing in this business and industry. But, you know, we got approached by the guy who still manages the band, Heath Bradbury, who managed Jebediah and a bunch of other bands from Perth. And, you know, once we sort of got involved with him, and when he figured out kind of what band we were, you know, it kind of, when you're in, you know, hands like that, experienced hands, it changed the game for us and allowed us to kick on, and sort of that's kind of where we got into North America and got into Europe and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, he still manages the band. I don't know how he stuck with us this long, you know. But hey, here we are, you know. We've tested him. Trust me on that. We have tested him.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Kenny, quick follow-up to that. So Heath is the manager of Carnival. John Watson is the manager of Birds of Tokyo. John Watson, for those that don't know, is a famed Australian manager, really. Cut his teeth managing Silverchair from day one. Now also managed Missy Higgins, Cold Chisel, Midnight Oil. What does working with an iconic Australian manager like John Watson bring to the table?
I think when you work with managers like John, there's just a bit of there's a sense of, you know, and it goes for Heath too, there's a sense of confidence too, where you are able to just work, run and perform just as an artist. So you basically, your job, only because you have the right people in the right places and they're effective, your job is just to be a songwriter. It's just to be an artist and be as good as you can at that, and sort of put your part of that back into the project, back into the band, and just know that the rest of it is being taken care of, and that's kind of what you want. You want people around you who allow you to be the best sort of artist you can be in those terms.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Kenny. Thanks for that. Back to you, Tom.
Wicked. Well, Jacob, if Jacob Augustin wants to jump in, he had a great question just with regards to inspiration between the two different bands and stuff like that. So Jacob, if you want to have your time.
Yeah, sweet. Hey Kenny, how's it going?
Hey Jacob, hey man.
Just wanted to ask if you listen to certain types of music when you're looking for inspiration for either Carnival or Birds, or if you just listen to what you're feeling.
Yeah, man. I don't really have any sort of go-to stuff, but I'm a bit of a sucker for pulling influence. Actually, you know what, man? It's not influence; it's more inspiration out of just whatever's sort of happening around me. Like it's either whatever some of the dudes in the band are listening to, or if anybody's been sending me any music. I think that kind of triggers me when I'm actively writing. Like I always pull something from it. And that could be influence. I find it somehow hard to recognize with my influences, but I'm sure they come across in my music. But I think when I'm writing, I try and share as much music. I try and get as much music as I can from the band and from the guys, only because I just think it helps inspire, you know, those moments when you just don't have anything kicking around, you know.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much.
Cool.
Right. Nick also had a wicked question. Nick Roller, if you want to jump in, have a yarn.
Hey. Yeah, it was cool to hear about how you kind of like punish yourself with the routines of trying to like write. You know, I feel like that's such a problem that like everyone faces, you know, like not having any inspiration. So that's cool to hear. I was just wondering, I think like a couple years back, I heard something about Birds of Tokyo sort of analyzing like charting songs in Australia or internationally and kind of like using some of the different, I don't know if it was like musical theories or just, you know, kind of like what's hot at the moment. But yeah, I've heard that you guys have kind of used that to sort of craft more successful songs for like radio and stuff. It'd be cool to hear more about that if that's not a myth.
It kind of is a myth because I don't know how to do that. So I think it is. It's a good idea. It's a good idea. Yeah. If you know how to do that, you should do that. That's a good idea. But yeah, I don't know how. I mean, you can always kind of see. I think to be honest, man, if you were to do that, I think the simple science behind that would be look at like the top charting pop songs in the world, break down their song structure, find out why the key hooks, find out why they work and where they place them and all that sort of stuff, and then just try and replicate it, I guess. But I don't know. I could blow up in your face. I don't know.
Right, cheers.
Go.
Thanks, Nick.
No, I think this was a double banger for both Rob and Kenny. From William, if William wants to jump in and have a yarn and maybe spin it to both of you guys.
Yeah, g'day guys. Yeah, I was just trying to remember what question I asked. Oh yeah, that's right. I have a question to both of you. If you can change anything about the industry on a local level, national, international even, given that you guys are both sort of veterans of all those arenas, what would it be? I mean, basically, what shits you off about what's being done now that you would change?
I'll let you kick that off, Rob.
I was just about to say the same for you, Kenny. It's a cool question, Will. Thanks for that. I mean, overall, I would say the health of the music industry in Australia is in a good spot. That's the first thing I would say. And then globally, I would say it's in a great spot. If I compare it now to even like 10 years ago, before streaming had really taken hold, we're in a much better place. So I'm more focused on the positives, which is probably my natural disposition anyway, than the negatives. If there was something I would change, and there's something that annoys me, it's that commercial radio in Australia just doesn't support Australian artists enough. It's one of these things where it's hard. Like, they have a business, and thank God we've got Triple J. I love Triple J. I love everything they stand for and what they do. But what I would like to see is commercial radio just have a bit more of an active role. I'm not saying they need to play, 40% Australian music, but it's just they do still have a role in getting music out there. So I think that would be the big shift for me. How about you, Kenny?
That's been the one sticking point with me for a long time, for over the years. So yeah, I would love to see more Australian content played, backed and promoted. I mean, it would be great to have some sort of national, agenda across all radio formats where
Yes.
they played some part of content. You're right, we would be quite screwed without things like Triple J, really. I mean, but if every radio station, maybe not every, maybe that's a bit of a reach, but if most of them played a percentage content and it was Australian stuff, it would make a huge difference. Yeah.
Agreed. I think that's it. Bringing in some legislation that encourages that behaviour would be huge, and it would just lift everything up. And I don't think it even has to be. I'm not saying it should be like 50% Australian, and it has to be out of that 50%. 40% has to be new bands. It's just some sort of guideline. It would make a big difference and lift everyone up. But yeah, great question, Will.
Sorry,
Nice one,
there
man.
was a B side to that question as well.
Go for it.
It's probably more for Rob than Ian, especially with the Fame Boys. What is the Australian industry doing well that the rest of the world could take a page out of our book from?
Well, the number one thing that Australia does very well is they have a national funded radio station in Triple J. So this is something that a lot of countries don't have. Obviously, the UK has it with BBC One, Two, their various channels. But what Australia does very well is they have a radio station like Triple J that reaches the whole entire country. So getting your song onto Triple J is huge because you can develop a profile nationally. So that's the one big thing I would say they do great. And then look, we've got a healthy live music industry and a history of people going to shows and concerts and lots of great festivals. So the Australian music scene overall is fantastic. Triple J is brilliant, and we're very lucky to have it.
So
Agreed.
I think I just want to jump in as well, Rob, just to throw a little fact your way. Is that so? They did a government inquiry about a year ago. So we're in January 2019, and the government inquiry says that 25% Australian artists should be played on every single radio station, and so that's what the government recommends now to every radio station, is that they must play 25% Australian music. But they did like a study, and I think that when they did the study at the exact same time last year, I think the two main radio stations in Perth were playing, I think it was Nova and 92.9 were both under 10%.
Yeah, that's right. That sounds about right to me. So I think what it needs to be is, instead of like a recommendation or a guideline, it's like, this is what's required. And if you don't, there's a penalty. Because I know they've got that sort of hardline stance in other countries. So like France is a good example, where 50% has to be French speaking and music. 50% quota has to be. Like, there's no ifs or buts around it, and it creates a really robust scene.
Which probably goes hand in hand, given that the art scene there in France, they are super backed, like they're backed by the government. They really look after their artists over there. So I'm not saying the Australian government doesn't, but the French do it and do it well. They really do. Yep,
absolutely. Tom, we're sort of running out of time here. Is maybe one more question from you?
Yeah. The last one I think would go out to anyone who's I guess an instrumentalist or a vocalist. That Christopher Ellis had a good question just with regards to some singing techniques. Chris, if you want to jump in.
Hey, nice to hear your thoughts and stuff, Kenny. It's really interesting to actually just see you in a normal sort of world. But yeah, in regards to your how you sort of prepare for singing, because your singing voice is remarkably different to your speaking voice, which is, I guess it always is. But I'm just intrigued if you have like a magic sort of set of things you always do to prepare and get yourself ready for the the peak.
Yeah, I kind of do, man. I've got a whole routine actually, which is it's a combination of a bunch of like warm up exercises, a bunch of runs and scales and trills, using different vowels and diphthongs and a whole bunch of stuff that sort of gets the voice warm and sort of exercise my vocal cords and my vocal folds a fair bit before I actually go out and do a performance. I've had to learn how to do that. It took me a while to sort of get a handle on it. As a younger dude and a younger singer, I just kind of went out and just belted it, and that gets you so far. That's cool. But these days, I kind of work on my technique. So I've got a whole thing I do. I could go into it, but it would take a fair bit. There's a whole bunch of exercises and steam. I breathe steam too, like when I feel like, well, I'm sort of 4 or 5 or 6 shows sometimes in a row. You can kind of feel it, just your voice, and all it is just in the chords, and all it is just a bit of fatigue because you've got so much blood flowing through the chords. The blood retains in the chords when you rest at night, and it's all it is inflammation. That's basically the enemy of the voice. People might think, oh man, I've hurt my voice or I've got nodules. Chances are you haven't. You can always get that looked at, but a lot of it, the enemy of actual delivery and speech is inflammation. So breathing in steam just from a kettle at a safe distance, either pre or post performance, can help with inflammation. A good warm-up technique, and I've got a warm down thing as well, which is basically the same group of exercises with slightly different placement in the mouth, with different vowels. And that's just basically what that does, is takes the blood out of the chords. There's a bit of science to it, man. I kind of know a bit these days on all that, only because I've had to, because there was times there a long time ago where we'd sort of be hitting that, maybe that 5th or that 6th show if we were doing that. We don't really do that anymore, and I definitely would feel like, wow, man, I'm towing the line here. So yeah, I do like how you pointed there's a difference in the way I speak and the way I sing, because there truly is, my friend. There really is.
Yeah, it's remarkable, and I know it's common with most singers, but yeah, I think it's amazing. Like to me, you like right now, you sound like just this casual dude, but when you sing and you're on show, it's this other amazing creature, and I think that's fantastic.
It is.
Cheers, bro.
So true. Well said. Great question, Chris. That's awesome. Everyone, I want to be respectful of Kenny's time here, and and everyone else's. And I think we'll wrap this up. As a closing remark, I want to thank you, Kenny, for taking the time to do this. It's great. It's inspiring for me personally, and I know it'll be inspiring for so many of the Hen House bands and the people that have tuned in here. Just really appreciate it, mate, and want to wish you all the best with the release of Human Design, Bird's new record, and just say that, love your humility, love your attitude, love your zest for life, and it's great to see, mate, and I'm so proud of everything you've achieved, and it's been a real pleasure watching it over the last 22 years.
Oh man, back at you, man. Truly, honestly, thank you to you for setting this up, and for everyone for tuning in. This has been fun, to be honest. I don't often do these things, but I've enjoyed this. So thank you to everyone for your time. It's been awesome, and stay safe and stay weird in your little boxes, for as long as we need to. But yeah, stay cool, huh?
Indeed. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Everybody.
Thanks for tuning in. Give us a thumbs up. I'll do a screenshot here. That's great. Awesome. Well, thanks, everyone. We'll do some more of these, so keep an eye out for them. And once we open the Hen House once again, I hope to see you all there. Thanks, guys. Catch ya.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
See everybody. Bye.